Is it okay to be more aggressive in your portfolio mix when you're trying to catch up for retirement? I want to help my mom start on her retirement. She's turning 49 this year and she's starting at 0. What do you think? Because I know you have thoughts about how aggressive you should be. What if you're starting later?
I liked your question, Alyssa, when in my head it was going this way. Is it okay to be more aggressive in your strategy when you're behind? To which I would unequivocally say, yeah, if you're behind and you're starting at 0 later in life, man, you do have to be aggressive. You have to save aggressively. You have to cut expenses. You have to make hard decisions. You have to do some aggressive things in order to make up for lost time. But you kind of went a slightly different direction. You said, is it okay to be aggressive in my portfolio? Which means take on more risk than likely would be appropriate given my circumstances. And that one makes me a little nervous. That one I don't know that I'm willing to sign off on.
I'll give you some experience share and then tell you some actual terms that you can do a little research on to see why we have this hesitation. I have been managing money since the mid-90s. And I can tell you many times this is a common trend you see with people. They figure out personal finance at a later age, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to let my money work as hard as possible. And I think about the late 90s where everybody was just buying all the tech funds, loading up, and they were so happy because they were, for a period it was working because we were crushing it. You had 20+% for 2 or 3 years in a row. They're like, but trees don't grow to heaven. And here's why you have to be careful just loading it up on what the latest and greatest trend is that seems to be doing, growing that tree to heaven. Is that there's 2 terms. There's risk tolerance. That's the term where when you have the ability, when the market has volatility, are you immediately going to reach for the sell button because emotionally it's just too much for you to handle? That's what, and whenever you sign up as a client with like a brokerage company or anybody, they're usually going to do some type of attention to risk tolerance because it's a compliance thing as well. Is how much risk can you handle before you call and cry uncle? I don't know why I have this uncle theme going through today.
A bunch of uncle today.
But that's risk tolerance. The second thing that people never talk about, it's that component of risk that's kind of the silent part, but it is a very powerful part. It's called risk capacity. Is that as you get older, and you said your mother is 49 years of age. Now look, if she's going to traditional 65 on her work life, then just her time horizon allows her to be more aggressive. But then just because she's got 16 years before she's actually retiring, that time horizon is going to allow some aggressiveness just because you're 16 years from actually reaching the date. However, if you tell me your mom is trying to retire at 55 and she's 49 years of age right now and starting at 0, you might actually be cutting your knees out by taking on more risk, because what happens is that you get too close to retirement age. Let's just say this thing works out spectacularly for the first 3 years and you take all this risk, but then the year that she's getting ready to retire and you get a sequence of return failure, meaning that all of a sudden the market goes down 40%. It does happen, by the way. Go look at the Great Recession. And then all of a sudden you see your portfolio get almost halved. And you have to ask yourself, how many years would it take for my portfolio to recover? And if it's like 6 years, 7 years, because you took so much risk at the portfolio. Because remember, if you lose 50% of your money on an investment, what do you have to make to recover that money? It's not 50%. You have to make 100%. Right. And if you think about the average rate of return that we're telling people is 8% a year, and then you just lost, you have to have 100%. You start doing the math and you go, oh my gosh, this is going to take a decade. Well, I got to live off this money. You don't have the time to actually recover. That is what is called risk capacity. You might be the biggest cowboy, the cowgirl, where risk tolerance it's just water off a duck's back. But I'm telling you, if you don't pay attention to risk capacity and your ability to have the time to recover, you're going to have a failure that you might not be able to recover from.
Yeah, I think a good resource I would point you towards, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we have a deliverable called How Much Should You Save? We oftentimes say, incorrectly, call it, what can 25% do for you? But this is a great one to show. based on savings rates, how much of your income could you replace at different ages with different savings rates? Well, if your mom is 49 years old, I'd point her to, okay, if you're 50 years old, what would your saving rate need to be, and what kind of income replacement can that create for you? And what you might have to do is redefine what retirement looks like. It may not look like the traditional age 65, completely leaving the workforce, but it may be something where it's a graduated step down from work to at least get moving in that direction. But it's a great resource you can use to figure out what is still possible in this next 16 years.
And remember, when we do retirement planning, you're basing it off of the expenses you'll need in retirement. And don't forget to take into account like Social Security and other things to really hone in on what is that goal you're trying to build for.